ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Amity University and Amity Institute of Public Policy, I, Vibhu Bajpai, extend a heartwarming welcome to all of you. Today, we have gathered for a thought provoking lecture by our distinguished guest, Dr. Kumar Aniket. I would request Dr. Bidisha Banerjee, Associate Professor and Deputy Director at Amity Institute of Public Policy, to the dais.
Good afternoon, everyone. Those of you who are present here physically, and our founder, sir, and chancellor, sir, joining us online today. We have been trying to get this done for a very long time, and it's really wonderful that we have Dr. Kumar Aniket with us today. I'm going to just read it out because trust me, it's quite a fabulous profile that Aniket has. So, Dr. Kumar Aniket is an academic who works on the interface of economics, philosophy, and the built environment. He grew up playing cricket. Who didn't, by the way, in Delhi? On the streets of Delhi, like a good all rounder. He said he also did some plays in school. He straddles the world of economics, philosophy, and the built environment with equal ease. There are other things also I can vouch for that he's very comfortable with. Dr. Aniket obtained his bachelor's in economics from Hindu College and his master's in economics from the Delhi School of Economics. He obtained his PhD from London School of Economics in 2007. After LSE, Dr. Aniket spent a decade as a Cambridge Don. Now, what's a Cambridge Don? In case you're wondering, yes, he wore a black robe and ate dinners in the candlelit halls at Cambridge. No, he did not have a magic wand or an invisibility cloak. At Cambridge, Dr. Aniket was the Director of Studies for Economics at Trinity College, Murray Edwards College, and the Newnham College. He was also a trustee of Murray Edwards College and served on its governing council from 2013 to 2017. Dr. Aniket is currently a research fellow in the Faculty of Built Environment at University College London. As he grew up, Dr. Aniket watched Delhi radically transform itself before his eyes. It drew him to explore the links between economics and the built environment. So if you ever need an expert who can explain the economic principles of street cricket on the Delhi streets and how it connects to urban planning, he's here. So without further ado, we will begin the lecture, but first we will have Dr. Gurinder Singh to welcome our guests. And we have, besides Dr. Kumar Aniket, his father, Mr. K.M. Singh, his mother, Dr. Jayashree Singh, and his wife, Ms. Murray, with us as well here today. So Dr. Gurinder Singh.
Some days are truly historical. They are historical because you are able to get the blessings of those who have been the force behind the group called Amity, in which all of you are the students. You are really privileged that today you have a company of Shri K.M. Singh, a very senior IPS officer. Give a huge applause to him. When Amity was being born, Shri K.M. Singh ji, for whom we have got the highest respect, he not only guided but helped Amity to grow, but was also advising us that how it should look like. Today, when I interacted with him after almost, you can say, 2.5 decades, it was such an inspiration that on the lunch table also he was talking and he was contributing that how academics should look like. Give once again a huge applause to him. We have with him a very respected figure of Indian academics, Dr. Jayashree Singh, who is not a very affectionate mother of our speaker of the today, Dr. Kumar Aniket, but is also a very known psychologist. And I was given to understand that one of our research articles has more than 500 citations. And on the lunch table, give a huge applause to her. And on the lunch table, when we were sitting, I was, I think, educated 20 times more because she touched on very sensitive issues like drug abuse, how to lower down the suicide rate amongst the students, and how we can reduce the stress level of the youngsters. Thank you so very much, ma'am. But keep on coming. I think that we will keep on calling you. Uh, a man is known by a lady who is an inspiration. We have with us Miss Mary Camille, who is a very able writer. She has written many novels. She is a one person who is a household name in fiction. Give a huge applause to Miss Mary, who's here. And she happens to be the wife of Dr. Kumar Ankit. Dr. Kumar Ankit, I was going through your profile, and the more I go through your profile, the more I have to say that you not only are an ambassador of Indian academics, but you are the one who has made every Indian educationist so proud. Give a huge applause to Dr. Kumar Ankit. As you know that at MIT, it's a passion of your founder, Dr. Chauhan. It's the vision of your chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, and all the 12 vice chancellors we have, and me as a group vice chancellor, very able deans and directors I can see on the stage, Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Yogender, Dr. Deepak Bajaj, Mr. Dr. Singh, and many others who are sitting here. But this is a vision of the foundation that students who are a part of MIT University, we should be able to present them an international speaker who can talk about that what changes we are making in the world. And interdisciplinary research is one area where Dr. Kumar Ankit has worked quite a lot. And today, when we were discussing, I think that very valid point he was saying that we would like to see that how art, science, they can come together and how we can use technology in the public policy. We would like to listen more from you, but on behalf of our founder, Dr. Chauhan, who has got very high respect for Shri KM Singh ji, ma'am, for you, Dr. Jay Shri ji, and for your entire family, we welcome Dr. Kumar Ankit and Miss Mary. It's such a privilege to welcome you at MIT. Thank you so very much.
Professor Dr. Gurinder Singh is Group Vice Chancellor and Director General ADMAA, AIBS, and AUGN. Thank you, sir, for your encouraging words. And now I would like to call upon stage Dr. Lakshita Bhagat, Faculty, Amity Institute of Public Policy, to the dais for the felicitation announcements.
A very good afternoon to all of you. It is now our turn to felicitate our esteemed guests. To begin with, I would like to invite Dr. Gurinder Singh to felicitate Dr. Kumar Ankit. Please, sir. Here. Let us give them a huge round of applause. Thank you very much, Professor Gurinder Singh and Dr. Kumar Ankit. Now I would take this opportunity to invite Professor Sukhwant Singh Bindra to felicitate Dr. Jaya Shri Singh. Please, ma'am. Please. This is our honor to felicitate you. As a great academician, it is an honor to felicitate you, ma'am. Thank you, Professor Bindra and Professor Jayashree Singh. It gives me immense pleasure to invite Dr. Deepak Bajaj to facilitate very respected Shri K.M. Singh. Please, sir. Let's give them a huge round of applause. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Bajaj and Shri K.M. Singh. Lastly, let us welcome Kavita Inderpurkar, Joint Administrator and Professor, AMET School of Economics, and our very own Dr. Yogendra Singh from AMET Institute of Public Policy to felicitate Miss Marie. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Please, ma'am, please come on board. Let's give them a huge round of applause. Appreciation should not stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshita. I would now like to invite our esteemed guest, Dr. Kumar Aniket, to deliver his lecture. Sir, please.
तो ये
Please settle down quickly. The lecture is about to begin.
Good afternoon. Let me start by drawing your attention to what's on the cover slide. What does it look like? Any guesses? So I'm hoping this is going to be a bit more of an interactive talk. And I want to talk about the concepts, but I also want to hear from you. So we're going to explore various different grounds, and it would be very nice to hear from you. Any guesses what is on the picture? Okay. It's a crumpled piece of paper. And I want you to think about this and keep this at the back of your mind, because I'll keep repeating and coming back to the theme of a crumpled paper. And if you're wondering, what is a crumpled piece of paper? What does it have to do with infrastructure and space? That's exactly what I want to get across. That when we think about infrastructure and we think about space, a crumpled piece of paper is a very, very useful pedagogic device. It's a very useful. So if I want you to take away anything from today, it would be an understanding of what a crumpled piece of paper has to do with infrastructure and space. So, by the way, in case any of you want to see the slides, if you just go to this website, you will be able to see these slides on your phones, in case you missed something and you want to go back. So it's econversation.github.io. You'll go there and you'll see the Amity presentation slides site on the link, in case you want to go back. So the two things I want to talk about is space and infrastructure. Now, what happens is, the way we understand concepts, we associate ideas with a word, right? Now, the difference between academia and a normal conversation is that we use the words colloquially. So when we use the words colloquially, we have a Lights are quick. Normally, when the lights go off, that's the time to leave, right? Okay, please don't leave. So when we think about words, we think about their colloquial meaning. And what I mean by colloquial meaning is that the meaning attains a kind of a meaning in your head, and it may have nothing to do with what it actually means. So we were driving from Delhi to Amity, and my wife, who's not very familiar with Delhi, asked me, what does the D&D flyover mean? And I said to her, is do not disturb flyover, because that's what the meaning in people in Delhi, they talk about it as do not disturb flyover. So my father corrected me and said, it's not do not disturb, it's actually Delhi Expressway. And so think about this, how the word D&D has attained a meaning of its own, which is very distinct from its original purpose. Now, the reason I'm drawing your attention to this is because the idea of space and the idea of infrastructure, they have meanings that have got associated with it. And these meanings often are at variance with reality, what it started was and what is useful. Now, it's really important for us to think about what space means. And when you start thinking about, what space means, you always have to think about functionally, why are you examining the notion of space or infrastructure? Now, infrastructure is this fascinating word. I don't know if you've noticed, any problem in the world, the solution is always infrastructure. So, infrastructure, the word itself, you hear it in terms of firm level infrastructure, city level infrastructure, village level infrastructure, country level infrastructure, and global infrastructure. Now, poor little word infrastructure, you're asking a lot of it, right? And how is it possible that the same word is associated at different levels? Now, turns out, when we think of infrastructure in a lecture like this, you would think of roads. But you would not think about firm level infrastructure, because firm level infrastructure, if I say firm level infrastructure, roads has nothing to do with it, right? So it turns out I spent a lot of time trying to understand what infrastructure means. And why was that important? Because we're often told any development problem that we have can be solved by infrastructure. The more I thought about it, the more I read about it, I found that people were talking at cross purposes. Somebody says something can be solved by infrastructure, they mean something else. Another person says something else, they mean different things, but they're using the same word. Now, in science, things are very precise. Everything has a definition, right? And everyone agrees on their definitions. One of the struggles we have in social sciences or humanities is that we don't agree on the definition. And when we don't agree on the definition, when we advise the policymakers or policymakers talk about it, that lack of a precise meaning creates huge amount of problems, right? So the question is the infrastructure that we need to solve the problem of poverty, the infrastructure that we need to solve the problem of climate change, they might be different infrastructures. We can't just use the same word. Now, I went deeper and started thinking about when did this word infrastructure pop up? So it turns out you can actually do this by going to Google and doing this kind of n-gram, which tells you how often the word pops up. So it turns out before 1960, nobody had used the word infrastructure. But now we associate railways and electricity with infrastructure, but railways and electricity were being used previously. So what were they called? And why in the 1960s did it become fashionable to associate these words with infrastructure? Now, it's not part of my plan to tell you what the full definition of infrastructure is. And the reason is because I'm like somebody looking with a torch in a forest, trying to find the definition, and I'm at the start of my journey. I will tell you what I have found. And I'll tell you kind of a schema of how we can think about infrastructure. But my objective would be to provoke you to think about this. And if you're expecting clear answers, simple answers, unfortunately, the world's complicated and those answers are not there. Now, yeah.
So, Aniket, what you're telling us is that you don't have a definition of infrastructure?
What I'm telling you is that I'm going to describe a methodology by which we can arrive on a definition of infrastructure. But that methodology has to be developed further. And the second thing I'm telling you is that when we think of the word infrastructure, we should never use it on its own. We should always use the infrastructure with something. Infrastructure for climate change, infrastructure for economic growth, infrastructure for poverty reduction, infrastructure that solves the problem of the firm. The word infrastructure, just like the word the doesn't have a meaning. The just kind of starts a sentence. It qualifies, or there are words that qualify things. So infrastructure as a word, you should never take it as given. You should always question, what do you mean by infrastructure? What are our objectives? So that's, yeah. Okay, so these are the various definitions from different sources that find of infrastructure. Now I'm going to go through them, but in orange are the words that pop out. So some definitions mention society, others mention interrelated systems, societal living conditions, specified standards, sustainable functionality. By the way, sustainable again is a word which has the same problem as infrastructure. The most sustainable thing in the world is plastic, one of the most things, but it's not sustainable in the word in terms of climate change. So the word again is very, very, very imprecise, but I'm not going to go down that path. Physical networks, institutions, standards, right? So these are all words that pop up. Everyone's trying to define infrastructure. And my experience was that when I started reading articles, so I read about 200 articles from different disciplines: architecture, computing, economics, and anthropology. And I found that almost every article, with the exception of some really exciting work in anthropology, almost every article was taking the definition of infrastructure as given. They never provided a definition, okay? I'm going to take you down the path of thinking about infrastructure with an example, right? So I don't want to, leave you in the lurch and do a very conceptual talk. So, I think of myself as an economist who late in life learned the importance of philosophy. So I can go down that path, but I don't want to take you there. What I want to do is set a very specific example, which is very relevant for India, and then make you think about infrastructure in the context of that. So I'm going to talk about a fish market in Kerala, set of fish markets in Kerala, which were very carefully studied. Now, why are fish markets really interesting? So with technology, we can move things around quite a lot. We can refrigerate them. You can buy a kiwi from a different part of the world, or you can buy, all kinds of things from different parts of the world. If you're a connoisseur of the fish, which often communities in coastal areas are, they don't like frozen fish. So the freshness is very important. And because it's a fresh product, studying fish markets gets really exciting because it tells us a lot about how markets function. So there's this famous study that I'm going to describe in detail. What they did was they looked at how the fish markets along the coastal belt of Kerala operated, right? So you can see the map there. I'm sure all of you know where Kerala is. So Kerala is a long state and it has a huge coastal area. And so Jensen, this particular person, went there in 1997 to study whether the fish markets were operating efficiently. Now, I'll define the word efficiently. Efficiently, again, is a word that we all use without thinking very hard about what it means. So I'll define efficiently very carefully. But they just wanted to see, are the fish markets working? So the idea was that fisherfolk in the morning will get up really early when we are all comfortable in the bed. They get up, they take the boats out into the sea, they catch the fish, and then they bring it back and sell in markets, right? This is still happening in large parts of the coastal area. So, when I visit Goa a lot, and I can see this, if you go early enough in the morning, they're coming back around sunrise with the boats and with fresh fish, and then you can buy that a few hours later in the market. So very fresh fish. Now, the thing is, think about the decision-making process that you would have if you were a fishing person on the high sea. So you've gone and fished all the sea. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Now you have 15 markets along the coast. Which market should you go to? Now the time for buying fish in any fish market is very short. It's 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours. If you don't get that time, you've lost it. So you're at high sea. And this example would become extremely important in understanding the notion of space. As I extrapolate from this in terms of the rest of the country. So you're at sea and you have to decide which market should I go to. Now this is your livelihood. If you make a wrong decision, you might end up in a market where there's an oversupply and you have to throw away a fish. If you make the right decision, you might end up in a market where there's a short supply, there's excess demand, and you get a very high price, right? So it makes a huge difference. But the question is, how do you make the decision? And if you think very hard about this, this is a spatial decision. The price exists far away from you. You don't know how to get it. The only way to get it is to physically go there, right? So this person, Jensen, studied 15 markets over a period of time in Kerala. On one particular day, on 14 January 1997, these were the prices. So you can see some of the markets, all the red dots are the prices. Some of the markets had the price was zero because there's excess supply. Some of the markets, the price was extremely high, and there were some markets in the middle where the price was between the range of around 5.9 rupees per kg, right? So we're talking about 1997. So some markets cleared, but a lot of markets, there was excess supply or undersupply. And the source of this was that the people who were at sea just did not know where the demand was that day, okay? Now here's something exciting that happens. But before that, I want to take you to France and think about this really interesting polymath called Wilfred Pareto. So in social sciences and economics especially, I can't overemphasize how influential he is, because this is the only cogent definition we have of efficiency. Again, a word we use all the time, but if you challenge somebody, what do you mean by efficiency? How do you know something is efficient? So Wilfred Pareto came up with this definition of efficiency, and his definition of efficiency was, and I'm going to repeat it a few times because if you haven't heard it, this is kind of difficult philosophical concept to get. He said, at an efficient state, you can't make anybody better off without making anybody worse off. Again, at an efficient state, you can't make anybody better off without making anybody worse off, right? Why? Because once you're at a state of efficiency, you can only take things from somebody and give it to somebody else. If you're inefficient, then you can actually improve things where you can make everyone better off, right? So this idea that trade-offs, when you get trade-offs in the world, that's when you reach a state of efficiency. Now, why am I telling you this? Because the fundamental result in economics comes from Adam Smith, and that, Adam Smith is quite maligned and people often don't understand him, but basically he made a very insightful statement about the markets, which connected to Pareto. So I'll come to that in a second. So we got Pareto efficiency definition, which is situations where you can't make anybody better off without making anybody worse off. Okay, so what happens next is this. On the Kerala coast, there is a sequential rollout of mobile phones, right? So we're talking about a time there are no mobile phones, and then they start setting up mobile networks. Now you can see where this is going. Once you have a mobile phones, the people at fish can actually phone fish markets and find out the price, right? So then they know where there is excess demand and excess supply. Where there's excess demand, more fish boats go to that. Where there's excess supply, less fish boat. So what happens next is fascinating. So the back line that you see is in a particular area. Before the black line, you see the prices go up and down. That's volatility. Sometimes the market's prices go very high, sometimes very, very low. That's the volatility. The mobile phone comes in where there's a black line, and the prices get stabilized. It comes in different areas at different times, and the moment it comes in, the prices get stabilized. Now, the market became more efficient. Why did it become more efficient? It became more efficient because the people who wanted to sell were able to find the people who wanted to buy. And this is the whole issue of market. So now I want to take you to Adam Smith. Okay, so really influential figure, and if you haven't come across him, he's really interesting to read. He is co-adopted by a lot of people who take his name in vain, but he was a very influential figure in Scottish Enlightenment. The reason I'm talking about these figures is because I always find that talking about figures and associating them with ideas allows you to remember it more. If I told you Pareto efficiency and Adam Smith's insight, and didn't show you a photograph, I found in my experience that students tend to register it less. So here's Adam Smith. And his idea was this: well-functioning markets are efficient. Okay? Now, this one sentence defines a lot it explains a lot about the modern society, right? So we became a market-based society in the 90s. What does that mean? What that means is that we believe in Adam Smith's insight. So if you believe in Adam Smith's insight, the idea is that markets somehow are able to reach efficiency. Now, why is this counterintuitive? So what is a market? What is Adam Smith's market? You leave a bunch of people in a room, and these people, some people have something to buy, people have something to sell. They go find each other. I meet somebody and say, I have something, do you want it? You say no. I go to somebody else, do you want it? What Adam Smith says is if you leave people for long enough, everyone would have exchanged anything they could have. Once all the exchange opportunities have been exhausted, right, the market comes to rest. Now, here's the fascinating bit, which people miss when they think about Adam Smith. That situation is Pareto efficient. Why is it efficient? Because if all exchange opportunities have been exhausted, that means there's no opportunity left for anybody to be made better off without making anybody worse off, right? Now, to understand the significance of this, what is the alternative? So you have a bunch of people who don't know anything about the world. All they know is, I have a banana, she has an apple, he has a laptop, and we are all asking each other, do you want this do you want to exchange apple for banana? So we are all people who don't know anything about the world, but somehow we've reached an efficient state. What is the alternative? The alternative is, so this is called decentralized allocation, where there's no centralization. Everyone does what they want to. A bit like a roundabout in Delhi, right? So a roundabout in Delhi, everyone's doing what they want to, right? And there's no direction. Everyone's just trying to find space. Alternative is that somebody says, this person needs this person needs that. I collect the information. How many bananas do you have? How many apples do you have? Can I transfer this? Right? And that decision-making process, when some institution like the government or any other institution does that, that has huge problems. It's kind of because people don't tell the truth, right? So people want to get the most for what they have. They don't tell the truth. So what happens often is that in institutions like a university, in a firm, often the allocation is centralized. Somebody is deciding who gets what. But these institutions then work in the market, and there's a decentralized institution. So the idea is that if there's decentralization, the markets can reach an efficient state. Nobody has to intervene. But here's the problem. So when I started reading all this and asking a question, the question is, where do all these people meet? You're presuming that for a market to function, the sellers should be able to find the buyers, and the buyers should be able to find the sellers, right? If you can't find each other, then the market will not reach efficiency, which was the case before the mobile phones came in. So mobile phones became this critical thing in allowing people to find each other. And the question is, this communication that happened through mobile phone, is that space or is that not space? Now, I would argue from a philosophical tradition that that is space as well. It's not physical space, it's not geographical space, but it's space. So the question that I started asking myself is, how do we create space across digital and physical world so that people can find each other? And that's where infrastructure comes in. You have a question?
I was actually wondering, do you think one of the ways we can tackle this problem or this creation of space is by having universal access to mobile phones? Because if mobile phones is a game changer, then can we look at universal access to mobile phones?
So this is
Some kind
this is a really interesting question, because we are told that with the advent of internet and mobile phones and technology, life, the trading opportunities would be available to everyone and the world would become flat. Turns out, not much has changed. The urban areas are still progressing and the rural areas are still lagging behind. And the key aspect is this. Here, in this example, the sellers were able to get information through the phone, right? But the good still needs to travel from the seller to the buyer. So the physical constraint of getting the good across, it's a bit like you say, I want a blue shirt of a particular specific characteristic, and you search the internet, you can find the information. And you might find that in New Zealand, a shop is selling your perfect shirt. Doesn't matter. The problem of buying it from New Zealand and getting it shipped across is complicated. So the mobile phones can help, but the physical space still has to support. Now here, this becomes really interesting because the example that I told you, it highlights one issue, but it cannot be extrapolated. It cannot tell you about the problems of the rest of the country. So here's the reason why. The space on sea was such that wherever the fisher folk were, they could go to any market, any of the 15 markets, right? Why? Because the nature of the space on sea was such that you can travel in any direction. Now, if you look at India, the map of India, and I'm going to show you something interesting later on, that's not true if you're in a city in Madhya Pradesh. You can't go anywhere. You can't go to Delhi. You can't go to Mumbai. You have to take the routes. Your routes are very limited. So the space constrains you a lot. The example of the fishing example is, it helps you to understand what if the space was continuous and you could travel in any direction. Now, the fish example applies to Delhi. Because, if you're in the middle of Delhi, you can go to any market because there are roads and you can go almost anywhere. But if you're in a village in Hatheen, or if you're in a village in Parbal, all these villages, you may be living on a road, or you may be living on a cross section. Your options are very limited. So the physicality of getting the good across is a huge problem. And the transport network in India is still not dense enough. It's dense enough. So if you live in an urban area, you think the transport network is very dense. But again, I'll have some figures at the end, which shows you that the transport network is not dense enough. So so this is what I want to take away from the fish market example. It's a typical example. It's a great example to understand the notion of space, but it's a typical example because most of India is landlocked. And it's an example that applies to urban areas and tells you why urban areas are flourishing because of the internet. But it also tells you that the options in rural areas are quite limited, and the rural areas, you are landlocked. Rural areas, you're landlocked because you may know that you want something from some place, but your transport network is quite limited.
So what you just showed us is that information is one part of the game, but space in that physical sense also matters.
Yes. So the idea is, for any market transaction, there are 4 spatial flows. So, think about, you want to, again, buy your blue shirt. So you go around the markets in Delhi. So the first thing you need is to find out information across space about the price and the quality in different shops, right? So price and quality, you need the combination. Now, some of the shops may advertise on the internet, others may not. So you may have to visit them. So in this case, the information is not flowing to you. You have to actually go across. And this is where this idea of coincidence of location. So has to be a coincidence of location between the buyer and the seller. The third flow is that if you agree the deal, the good has to flow from the seller to the buyer. It has to come to you. And then the money has to go off in the opposite direction. Now, the technology, the mobile technology can help in terms of price information and quality information. It is now able to help you even in payment information because you don't have to give people money. You can send the payment across. The physical aspects of the good coming to you is still complicated, or the goods you need to send. So imagine you're running a business in Sevan. You are a very talented tailor. You make beautiful shirts. The problem is you have customers across the country. You can advertise, they can find you, but you still have to send them. If you're living on a Kacha road, right, who will come and pick it up from you? So, so there are limitations. This is why internet's great for urban areas, but the rural areas in India still have their potential of the internet has been realized because there is a relationship of complementarity. The idea, okay, so let me just step back for a second and explain this idea. If things are substitutable, then internet can substitute for the problems of the transport network. But if things are complementary, then you need both of them to work together, right? So it's a bit like the four legs of a table. They're complementary, right? So you can take one leg away, that's redundant. You have three-legged table. The table has to have at least three legs. You take away one leg, the table would not work. The other two legs are useless. Now imagine that these four flows, they're complementary. So unless all four flows work, the market doesn't work. Now, what I'm going to do is make you think about the space, and I'm going to come back to the crumpled paper. And I'll make the connections back again, but let me just go to think about what is space. Space is slightly more complicated than what we've been talking about. So this is the lovely quote from Connolly, which says, "A place is simply there, it exists. But space is produced, is invented," right? What does that mean? That means that a location always exists on Earth. But the separation between two locations is the space. And how arduous that space is, how complicated the space is produced by humans. You build roads, you build planes, your airports, you build all kinds of, you build internet, right? So whenever you're thinking about two different locations and their relationship with each other, the space between them is invented, right? So, before telephone, the space between United Kingdom and India was different. Now with the internet and the telephone and the flights and the ships, which we don't use anymore, the space has changed. So space is always invented. And you can see where I'm going there because the invention of the space is through infrastructure. Now, instead of taking you down this path in a detailed way, I'm just going to read a quote. And it's a quote that I absolutely love. And I'm going to read it out in phases. So you can have a look at it. And I'm going to read each sentence because this quote kind of explains how we experience space. So it's not the idea of measuring space. Measured space doesn't change. So if you measure this space in this room, it will always remain the same. But if you arrange the chairs in a different way, you can bring people close together, right? Right now, all of you are together, but you're far away from me. We can rearrange things in such a way so that I'm in the middle and I'm closer to all of you. So space can be rearranged. So Michael Serre, who's a fascinating philosopher from France, in the French tradition of people who think about space, he says this. I'm going to read out, and my wife was very keen. She said, look, if you just show this quote, people not understand, you have to read it out. So, if you take a handkerchief and spread it out in order to iron it, you can see in it certain fixed distances and proximities, right? So take a handkerchief, you've taken a handkerchief out and you've ironed it and you spread it out. So let's do this. Here it is. So here's the handkerchief, I've laid it out. And now you ironed it and made it flat, okay? And it's spread out, okay? Now you can sketch a circle in one area you can mark out nearby points and measure the distance, how far they are. So you draw a circle and then measure out the distances. Then take the same handkerchief and crumple it by putting it in a hat. Now, what has happened to the distances? The distances, the points have suddenly compressed itself. Right? Some distances have compressed itself, others have moved away. Now, when we build high-speed railway lines and expressway, that's what we're doing. We are compressing certain distances. It's surprising how certain rural areas, not very far away from Delhi, take longer to get to than it takes me to get to London. It's 8 hours drive. But if I want to go to Jaisalmer or Jodhpur, and if I don't fly, it takes longer, right? So the space is extremely crumpled up. Now, what happens further is space, you tear it in certain places where 2 points that were close become distant, right? So if you think about Lahore and Amritsar, that's a great example of how there's been a tear in the space. These were cities which were not very far away, but a political boundary separated them out. Prison walls. You build a wall of the prison and you're separating people next to each other. Now, fascinating thing also is that when you build highways and high-speed rail lines, you separate spaces. When you create a flyover, you separate spaces. When you build walls, when you create enclosed communities, you separate out space, right? So if you build an enclosed community, you think, oh, it's safe. That's great. But the people who live on either side of the communities, you have created a rupture in space. And there is something called the enclosure movement. Again, if I had more time, I would have talked about it. The enclosure movement says, every piece of land, somebody should own it, and they should be able to wall it off, right? So we live in the world where the enclosure movement has become extremely influential. And in the virtual world, the patenting system and the copyright system has also become extremely, everything, boundaries can be drawn. But you are playing around with the space without understanding what impact it would have on the way in which society functions. The market is just one example that I've given you. But there are all kinds of other issues that occur where if the space, you feel alienated from the space, you feel you don't belong. And if you don't belong to that space, you have no incentive to look after that space. This This is a lovely map of India. This is the night light density. So this is from a satellite. And this is how, if you were up in the sky taking a photograph, this is what the night lights in India would look like. And there are some of these blank spaces in India, which are, of course, the desert or some mountains. But you can see that there are lots and lots of agglomerations, but a lot of space is just empty. There's just no infrastructure, right? Delhi stands out, and Mumbai maybe doesn't stand out because it's next to the sea. But the space, the way we've arranged them in India, the way it looks like from Delhi is very different from the way it would look like if you're living in different parts of the country. So thinking about space is extremely important. Now, the last two things I have for you are, there's a photograph, but how can we pin this down? So here is a table that tells you about the road network in India. So the road network, so I've taken the density of the road network, the length of the road network on a 4 kilometer square unit. So why 4 kilometers? Because 4 kilometers, if the 4 kilometers square, if you're in the middle, that's walking distance, right? So what is the length of the road in the 4 kilometer square? I mean, I presume Amithi's campus is about 4 kilometers square. I mean, roughly speaking. So you think about Amithi's campus, how many roads you have, what is the length? There's a huge number of roads. So on the average, in a 4 kilometer square area, what's the length of the road? So France and Germany are good examples which have fairly uniform transport density. So the road density for France, Germany is similar to India, but that's not the complete picture. Because in France and Germany, 100% of the roads, if you look at the second last column, are paved. Whereas in India, only 64% of the roads are paved, 64.69. So virtually 35% of the roads in India are kacha, right? So these are roads where people have walked and created kacha roads, but they are just kacha, right? So it tells you how much of the country does not have access to a transport network, railway network. And this has been a bit of a revelation to me, because I always thought railways covers all of India, huge railway network. Now, this I discovered this while having a discussion with a German colleague, and I said, Indian railways go everywhere. And he said, okay, let's compare. So, rail density at a 400 kilometer square, because I thought, let's find out an area of 400 kilometer square and find out what the rent of the railway is. So it turns out Germany in 400 kilometers square has 37.41 kilometers of rail. So literally, you can cut two diagonals. So you take a square and there are two diagonals. So each area of 400 kilometers square has a diagonal, which means it should have a station. For France, it's 20.19. For India, it's 8.29. So the railway network that we have is not dense enough. If you look at the station, for the same 400 kilometer square, Germany has 6.36 stations, France has 2.19 stations, and India has 0.189 station, right? So it tells you that the urban areas are like the sea. You can just go anywhere you want to, and space is not a problem. But in the rural area, space is a problem, and because it's a problem, even something as simple like markets are constrained from working. So if you want to sell your shirts from Sivan, you have a problem, because you don't have the road network or the transport network that will allow you to sell. The internet cannot do anything from you, right? So that's it. All I want you to think about is, if you think of space, think of a crumpled handkerchief. Thank you.
Aniket, I have a question for you, but I will hold off on that.
Okay.
Because I think there are audience questions
Okay.
on it as well. Thank you.
Any questions?
So, questions for the speaker?
Hello, sir.
Hello.
My name is Lokesh. So I wanted to ask you that you showed us a graph about those fishermen in Kerala, that after the introduction of cell phones, the fluctuation in the price differentiation among the markets of Kerala was decreased, and we can see less fluctuation happening there. So I just wanted to ask that, why does that happen often in markets, when we can see studies when there is interconnectivity, so all the markets, the price fluctuation, it doesn't happen much. All the prices for products, all the markets among that area is not much different. So why did that happen after the introduction of cell phones only?
Okay, so one of the ways to approach this question is to think about what we can see and what we can't. In markets where there is a lot of price fluctuation, people stop selling, right? So you only see markets that work. Now you can see the fish market because it was slightly inefficient. If it was very inefficient, there were either very high prices or very low prices, people would just stop selling, right? And so this is where we have to be careful about data and empirics. I always think that the balance between data and logic is really important, because there are lots of markets that could exist but don't exist, and because they don't exist, we don't see it, right? So that's where the logic takes, you have to think about that logically. Now, what we do know is that if you live in an urban area in India, you have huge opportunity to sell things. It starts from the street, then to the shops, and then to the malls. But there are no markets often in rural areas. The market towns tend to be very sparse. So the answer to that question is, Why aren't there more market towns in rural areas? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. Thank you.
He had a question there somewhere.
Hello, sir. My name is Dhruv. So I had a problem with Pareto's definition of efficiency. So don't you think it's a quite rigid definition? It does not allow for one to compare different levels of efficiency, because it says that you can't make anyone else better off without making someone else worse off, right? But I argue that the Kerala market was efficient earlier as well.
So,
Because eventually, when we move back to when prices are stabilized, you're essentially making the people who was the sellers in the excess demand market, you're making them worse off, aren't you? By stabilizing those prices.
okay,
Can
so
you-
yeah. So the first thing is that I've thought a lot about this. Pareto's definition of efficiency may not be great, but that's the only one I've come across. I'm not sure what your definition of efficiency is. So what you're doing here, if you think about it, is you're using your colloquial understanding of efficiency. You're not defining it, right? So let's hear you define efficiency. What is the alternate definition of efficiency?
Sorry, I'm not that smart to
No,
come up with the definition of
We are
efficiency.
not. We are all as humans not that smart, because nobody has been able to come up with a better definition, right? So that's it.
I just don't agree with him over here. Actually, efficiency I agree with. Okay, fine. Efficiency is agreeable. But you can't compare efficiencies, right? Eventually, when you talked about comparing efficiencies, that it makes the Kerala market more efficient once the mobile phones were...
There is no comparison of efficiency.
Uh,
No, there's no comparison of efficiency. Pareto frontier is the efficient frontier where there are trade-offs, right? But there is no comparison. I don't know what you mean by comparison of efficiency.
Okay, so we talk once the mobile phones are introduced in the market. We talk. Actually, you stated that it made the markets more efficient because the price fluctuations bottomed out. Basically, they moved in a smaller price band, right? So it made the markets more efficient. I just argue that initially also it was efficient because you made someone else worse off.
No. So, okay, let's step back. This is really important and a difficult concept, okay? The idea here is that if you allow everyone to exchange, they would make all the exchanges possible. Now, you don't know people's minds, right? This is the problem. You can't read people. So you are superimposing your perspective on somebody else's mind and saying they may be better off or worse off, right? You don't know that. I don't know that, right? All you can see is if you allow people to exchange as much as they want, then there will be no opportunities left to exploit. His definition, Pareto's definition is that's the definition, right? So the question is, were there opportunities left to exploit when the price was fluctuating? And you could argue whether they were or not. But once price stabilized, were there any opportunities left to exploit? And I'm not sure I understand why you think there were no opportunities left to exploit when there were no mobile phones. Fish is being thrown away, right? If you throw away the fish, that cannot be efficient, right? That means, you could have just given it to somebody else and they would have been better off. So how is that efficient?
But when we introduce the mobile phones, we make the sellers who were selling in the excess demand market,
Okay,
we make them worse off.
No. This is not an individual concept. This is a collective concept. Some people are getting, so this is a collective concept where the markets on the whole, the question is, are they working efficiently? I don't know. I'm trying to understand. You may be thinking from an individual's perspective. Are you saying that when the fish was being thrown off, the fish markets were efficient even though something was being thrown off?
Sir, I believe it can be argued that because the people in those fish markets were getting their fish for pretty cheap, weren't they? They were getting it at 1 rupees, not the 5 rupees which the equilibrium prices were.
So I still don't understand your definition of efficiency.
Yeah,
Okay, here's the thing, which is, in terms of dialectics, you have to define a concept and then you're using an intuitive understanding and your opinion, which is absolutely fine, right? But then you can't engage with Pareto because Pareto's defined his efficiency, you haven't, right? So you have to think about, what would your definition of efficiency be?
Come up with one quite soon.
Sure.
Don't
You
worry.
know, and this is the thing, we are all on a journey to understand the thing. So, you know, and I've scoured the literature because, you know, I heard about efficiency when I was a 22-year-old, and then I started looking at the definition. And, you know, in 200 years, nobody else has been able to define efficiency. So it's a bit like democracy. It may not be a great system, but it's the best one we have, right? So what you're doing is you're saying intuitively, I think, you know, it was efficient, but you can't think intuitively. You have to define your definition of efficiency. Okay?
So, Dhruv, you can continue this conversation
Absolutely.
after the
Absolutely.
lecture.
We can talk till the cows come home. I don't
So,
think
you know, we will have more question answers after we wind up the session.
Thank you, Dr. Aniket, for sharing your insights on such an important topic. And now I would like to invite Dr. Banerjee to deliver vote of thanks.
I know all of you are again very hungry, thirsty. I was hoping to make this vote of thanks really short and quick. But you know, with so many of you, I have to thank all of you one by one. So it's going to be a little longer. So bear with me. Thank you, Aniket, Dr. Aniket, for your expertise, insights, and passion with which you have made our understanding of infrastructure in so many manifold avatars so enriching. So thank you so much. I've especially found your conception of space and the way it applies to the Indian conditions very compelling and something very thought-provoking, especially for those of you who want to think of research in the future. I think this is a fascinating area and a fascinating topic. I stand before you with a heart full of gratitude and appreciation as we come finally to the close of this enlightening lecture. It has been a privilege for Amity Institute of Public Policy to host such an incredible event. And I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to several groups of people who have made this possible. Now, first and foremost, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to our esteemed Amity University and our founder president, Shri Ashok Chauhanji, whose foresight and dedication have laid the strong foundation upon which we stand today. Along with our chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, it has created an enduring legacy for which we are deeply grateful. The unwavering support of our vice chancellor, Dr. Balwinder Kaur Shukla, and group vice chancellor, Dr. Gurinder Singh, has been instrumental in making this event a reality. I would also like to extend our sincere appreciation to Shri K.M. Singh, to Dr. Jayasri Singh and Ms. Marie who have bestowed their presence on this event. To our institution head, Dr. Yoginder Singh, thank you for your guidance and sharing your experience. To Dr. Sukhwant Bindra for your mentoring. I would also like to mention the heads of other institutions who have been so benevolent with their support today. Thank you, Dr. Deepak Bajaj, and thank you, Dr. Kavita Indapurkar. To my colleague, Dr. Lakshita Bhagat, thank you for helping in many ways, many times. Last but not the least, thank you, fellow students. Your enthusiasm and active participation has made this event even more vibrant and engaging. Special mention to our PhD scholar, Vibhu Vajpayee, and the rapporteur team of Ayushi, Tanya, Babana, and Aditi. Thank you, Lokesh, for always helping with the logistics. And Sukanya, Dipanshu, Pragya, Palak, Yokmi for helping out with this event. And others, I mean, as I said, the list is endless, and I know you're very hungry and very thirsty. So together, we form a community, and these lectures are, in a way, taking this process further. We hope Aniket, Dr. Aniket will be back here soon to talk more about this area and many others. So have a wonderful rest of the day and thank you very much. Namaskar.